Why did Pope Clement VIII and his advisors kill Giordano Bruno? This is our topic today. Please subscribe to my channel. This is the Primordial Wave. And we are going to discuss briefly a piece of history, and we're going to go back in time during the 16th century and examine some of the reasons that led Pope Clement VIII to order the killing of Giordano Bruno. And we know that Giordano Bruno was a Catholic clergy, was a priest, but he was a priest that was not under the mind control of the evil, diabolical, ecclesiastical regime. He was not a man to be confined. He was not a man to cover the truth. He was not a man to ignore the voice of his conscience. He was a man that stood for science, that stood for God, that stood for people. And then you see the all-powerful ecclesiastical authority decided they were going to burn him on the stake. And they did. They killed him. They took him out. A brilliant scientist who was teaching the people the truth. What was he teaching? We found out many reasons as to why he was killed. But there are one particular reason that historians tend to ignore as to why the church ordered him to be killed. And we know, of course, that the powers that be, including ecclesiastical authority, who did not want the people to see the light, they wanted to repress knowledge. They wanted to confine everyone to darkness, because when people are enlightened, when people are wake up, you can no longer rule over them. You cannot threaten them with hell. You cannot threaten them with anything, because they have emancipated themselves from such religious dogmatism and dogmatic control. And the church did not like that. The church feared losing members once people began to wake up and stand up for what is true. The authority of the church will decline, right? And for this reason, certain people in history who stood up for knowledge, for true knowledge, who spoke the truth, had to bear the consequences. And sometimes the consequences were harsh and brutal, and in many instances, death. And that was what happened to Giordano Bruno, who was ordered to be killed by Pope Clement VIII, right? At this point, at this time, of course, historians will tell you that it was a period of Inquisition, and there were many other such killings going on all over the place, all over the place. People who stood for science were killed. People who did not agree with the doctrine of the church, the supreme doctrine of the church, were ordered to be killed. And people who had contrary opinions or viewpoints or theological belief systems were ordered to be killed. And it is surprising that when you talk to many Christians today, what you find out is that people believe that Christianity came as a result of love and kindness and all these other virtues that the church want or tend to propagate. But contrary to the fact, when you look into history, you will see that conversion came through the blade of sword and burning people at the stake, right? The church did it. Now, Giordano Bruno, like few awakened scientists of the time, were teaching a doctrine that the church could not accommodate. And I don't believe that the church was ignorant of what he was teaching. It's just that the authorities, the powers that be, the controllers of this world did not want the truth to come out. Because, as I said, when people get true knowledge and enlightenment, they are not going to be following established traditionalism in the name of following God and being mind controlled for the rest of their life. They will break away from the chains. And you need to utilize fear to keep people in chains. You need to utilize brutality. Oftentimes, we've seen that happen over and over in history. We've seen dictators trying to pick few people and make example out of them by really serious intimidation and sometimes extreme brutality to make sure that they psychologically destroy anyone who is even imagining putting out any sort of opposition or counter argument to the mainstream theological argument or the mainstream political establishment. So let's talk about some of the things that Giordano Bruno believed in. He was teaching science, cosmological science. He was teaching astronomy. And he was contradicting what, quote unquote, was in the Bible, right? What the church believed was the word of God. And they wanted him to retract his teaching, but he was a man. He said, I'm not going to withdraw my teaching because that was truth. That was truth. Even though the church, quote unquote, the church of God, who was supposed to stand on the truth, did not want to hear the truth, that the planet was not at the center of the world, right? He taught concepts that there were many other possible planets out there in the space, right? And what is the implication of this teaching of possibility of other life forms existing in different space bodies? He thought that the sun is one of the stars, and there are billions upon billions upon billions of stars in the space with different bodies, different planetary bodies orbiting these stars, right? Those teaching was something the establishment of the time did not want to get out. I don't believe it's because they don't know it, because is just one of the ways to make sure that the people did not rise to the next evolution of reasoning, right? And like many other brilliant minds of his time, he was killed. But then we also found out that it was not just because he was teaching this astronomical science. He was a Hematicist, and that is where we also found the African connection. He was teaching Hematicism. And if you have watched my previous movie, I spoke about the fact that ancient Egypt was the light of the world. All the religions, including Christianity, the concepts, the doctrines, the salvation doctrines, the redemption doctrines of a God who was born of immaculate conception, of a God who suffered and died and resurrected again after 3 days, sitting at the right hand of God, of a God who had 12 disciples, right? A God who is incarnate in the physical world. These doctrines were present in the pre-existing Egyptian ancient texts. And this was part of what the Europeans have adopted in the Hermetic doctrines, right? That this guy was teaching. And I think that the church might have feared him exposing too much as to the origin of Christianity, right? They must have feared that this guy was going to continue to open the eyes of the people to the historical lies, right? And they had to get rid of him. And if you watched my previous videos, I said that when ancient Egyptian civilization collapsed, finally collapsed, what happened was that the teachings of the Egyptian priests was plagiarized by Indo-Europeans. In fact, it was scattered all over the world. And these teachings, these doctrines, these philosophies, this metaphysical knowledge, this esoteric, or if you may, occult knowledge, were being taught in underground secret societies and secret establishments, right? And these people who were teaching them knew that these were the real knowledge. The religion they gave to the masses, to everybody, was seen as false light, was seen as indoctrination, was seen as a mind control of the people. Both the political establishment and the ecclesiastical authority or the ecclesiastical regime saw the mass religion, be it Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, they saw the religion they give to the masses as nothing but mind control techniques. And anyone who comes around and begin to teach anything that sounded like it was going to expose the truth had to be gotten rid of, either by excommunication or outright assassination and killing. And there are many of such killings, including some of them are very secretive that you look like, make CIA assassins look like babies, right? And carried out by the Vatican and all other such high top ecclesiastical figures in history has happened over and over and over. So my point is that Giordano Bruno was teaching heliocentrism at that time, the theory of heliocentrism, right? And we know that that theory, when you look at the theory of heliocentrism, we see Egypt, we see Africa, we see African, not just African cosmology, but also African astronomical teaching was present there. And we know that the church wanted to break away from Egyptian teaching, which they saw and begin to propagate lies, telling people Egyptian and African teaching was nothing but theogony, just mere theogony, just mere allegorical fables that doesn't have any historical or realistic validity to them, right? But in reality, the Christian doctrines came out of the ancient Egyptian knowledge, the ancient mystery system. And so Rome, as we know, was a continuation of ancient Greece because when Greek civilization collapsed, what we see emerging out of the ashes of classical Greece civilization was Rome, the same um, Indo-European extension or civilization continued, and Rome became the seat of power at the time that Christianity was emerging and spreading, right? Christianity emerged during the 1st century AD. And we know for certain that the Roman political elites, talking of the Roman emperors, right, decided to utilize Christianity judiciously for their own political agenda. And if you study history carefully, I'm not talking of the mainstream knowledge, the one that everybody has been taught at school. I'm talking of studying real history, right? You find out that the there are certain Roman emperors that were very important in the formation of what you call the Christian doctrine. Doctrine, right? The Vespasian family. The Vespasian family was very um, important when it comes to forming Christianity. And someday we're going to talk about the origin of Christianity and how um, it was formed by Rome as a political tool to neutralize what they call the Sicarians. The Sicarians were the millennialists, were the messianic, believed in this messianic millennialism, right? And Rome feared them so much because they were willing to do whatever it takes, including dying, uh, to maintain their culture, to maintain their tradition. And Rome saw them as an obstacle towards their colonialism and towards their colonization. And they had to utilize what we may call mind control, advanced thought mind control by this elite. They utilized it to neutralize Judaism, millennialism. I mean, messianic belief systems in Judaism, right? And we see that Christianity being found around the first century AD in Palestine began to spread in Rome. Why was Rome important? Because Rome was the seat of power. Rome was the global colonizer. Rome was the superpower of the world at that time. And the Roman emperors saw a golden opportunity because this new religion was spreading and people were buying it so rapidly. It was spreading like wildfire. So they stepped in, the elite stepped in and utilized such doctrines espoused in Christianity as a means of domination and a continuation of their political global domination. And this domination, this movement of Roman empires, Roman emperors utilizing Christianity to dominate the world came to a perfect fruition during the Nicene Conference in the year 325 AD when Emperor Constantine, the very wicked, evil, diabolical Emperor Constantine, convoked these bishops who were under his pocket, right? And then utilized them to create a certain centralized doctrine. Because at this time, there were different kinds of doctrine, belief systems being taught. What happened was that they politicized Christianity. What happened was that they centralized their doctrine. They say, well, unless you believe the same gospel, the same doctrine that this emperor supported, you are you don't believe, you are believing wrongly, right? So, and because of this centralized political power, what happened was that every other group of people who believed contrary to what the officials, the political officials sanctioned, were persecuted and killed, right? And that was another form of global control because we know that the people that were massively condemned as heretics actually had the truth. They actually taught the truth. But people were so brainwashed to believe that these people the church categorized as heretics were actually evil. And that's how brainwashing works. And because we've been so programmed this way, people do not investigate what, for example, the Gnostics thought. People don't investigate it in their theological quest, their theological research, right? Except people, of course, who are rebels, who want to deviate from the official narrative. But if you are a child of the church, right, you are, and you tend to study these doctrines that the church has condemned, you tend to study such based on the lens that the church has provided you, that they're evil, that they're bad, that they're heretics, that they're teaching some things that were not in sync with the real Holy Spirit or the real doctrine that God brought on this planet, right? So the fact we're trying to establish, or we're trying to make here, the point we're trying to make here is that Giordano Bruno's killing was because he was reaffirming the truth. And that truth was that Egyptian teachings, Egyptian doctrines, Egyptian philosophies, Egyptian religion, African sciences were at the basis, at the formation of not just Christianity, but science, totally, right? That was the implication of what he was teaching. And that was too much for the church to embrace. And we see how Christianity, particularly the Alexandria, Egypt, produced a lot of Christians, and most of these Christians were not given access during the Nicene Council because they retained the Coptic tradition, they retained the Gnostic tradition, right? They retained the Gnostic tradition, and the church did not want Gnosticism because Gnosticism was close to the truth, was close to the truth, and they have to squash it. They have to fight it. They have to destroy it. They have to burn libraries and books. I mean, if the church believed in the superiority of the best argument we win, why were they killing, quote unquote, the heretics? Why? Why not debate? Why not argue? Why not engage in dialogue, in discussion? But they did not do that. But because the evil of the time, the ecclesiastical authority that imposed itself as a global power was launching this massive campaign of assassination and killing of people that did not agree with their doctrine. And that was how Giordano Bruno lost his life. Now, when we look at history, we know that he was true. He was telling the truth. He was teaching the fact. He was teaching the truth. So, why it was possible to kill him in those days was because the world was under religious leadership. Everyone at that time, many people at that time were, have to belong to religious establishment. Unlike in this modern time, people can tell you I'm an atheist and they can write whatever they want to write, and nobody will kill them. I mean, they still persecute them up to this modern time, but it wouldn't lead to spectacular mass killing of people based on the doctrine, scientific doctrine that they are trying to teach. So my point is that ecclesiastical regime, the ecclesiastical authority killed Giordano Bruno because, one, he was teaching Hematitism. And by teaching and writing about Hematitism, it is going to expose the origin of Christianity. Origin, one of the best and brightest of the church scholars in history, fell into the same problem with the church. Why? Because Origen was teaching that the Christian doctrine was plagiarized from the Greek Dionysian cult, Dionysus, right? And it is true. The church did not want to hear that. And he went into some problems with church authorities, right? So, why is the suppression of truth important for the controllers of this planet? The controllers, people who control other people's mind and tell you what to believe and what you don't have to believe, because that is how you keep the ships down, right? If you want to control people, you keep knowledge away from them. By keeping knowledge away from them, controlling how they think, how they believe, you control them and you retain power for themselves. And for this status quo and power that be, it is all about keeping the power for themselves. Please subscribe to my channel. This episode is just brief, and watch out for another episode soon. This is the picture. I think this is probably an artist impression, a picture of Pope Clement the Eighth. Looks like a mean guy. And this is Giordano Bruno, the ex-clergy that was killed for speaking out the truth, for trying to teach the people and the world the truth that the church was trying to suppress. Ecclesiastical regime, when they sit on top of the truth, they wouldn't like that truth to come out. And they would like people to live in ignorance, right?